on this episode of the WildFed podcast.
I am a generalist. I'll just do everything I can at the same time because to me, it's about procuring food for the table. I mean, I think it's a good obsession to have, but it is an obsession.
When I think about how we approach wild food, we hunt, we forage or gather, we fish, and then obviously trapping's a piece too. It's not a very popular modality anymore, and it's sort of looked at a little bit negatively by a lot of the public till they eat beaver, right?
When I tell people I'm a squirrel hunter, they act like, you just said, oh, like I hunt at a grocery store.
A squirrel in a park, no one's allowed to hunt and they just know they're safe there. They get used to people, no problem. Once they're in the woods and you come in there with a rifle, they're like extremely aware of predation.
Even though it can sometimes be stressful or there's a lot of physical labor, or you might be in a cloud of mosquitoes picking blueberries, but it's still beautiful in the end. And I want to show people what that's like.
Episode 44 of the WildFed podcast, Reflections of a Wild Food Generalist with Clay Bowers, is brought to you by Surthrival. Everyone knows that testosterone is a crucial hormone in human physiology, but did you know that it's found abundantly in the pollen of pine trees? Testosterone-rich pollen, that same stuff that blankets the landscape in spring, can be used for androgenic hormone supplementation. It's especially useful for people who are considering pharmaceutical hormone replacement therapies but are interested in a natural, side effect-free alternative. Pine Pollen Pure Potency is a formula I developed for andropause support and combines the testosterone and other androgenic hormones found in pine pollen with compounds from other herbs like stinging nettle root that help to free your body's natural testosterone too. Right now until August 27th, all Pine Pollen products at Surthrival are 20% off with the coupon code PINE20. That's the word pine and the numbers 20, PINE20. Surthrival carries a full lineup of pine pollen tinctures and whole powders that can be used for more general nutritional support too. Get it for you, or get it for your dad, or get it for your granddad. Learn more about pine pollen and check out the rest of the lineup at surthrival.com. Hey, thanks for all those 5-star ratings and the incredible reviews over at iTunes. Listen, you only have to do this once to move the needle on how the show gets put in front of new listeners. You just go over to iTunes and hit the 5-star rating, assuming you think that we warrant it, and then write up a short but honest review, and you're done. You're done. Anytime you hear me asking, you can think to yourself, I'm all set. I've already given a little back to support Daniel and the WildFed team and their mission. It's instant gratification, and please know we read all those reviews, and they mean a lot to us. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. Today's episode is with my friend Clay Bowers. Clay, like me, is a generalist forager whose year unfolds as a series of hunting and gathering adventures. Clay also teaches wild food workshops in the Great Lakes region through his company Know Me Forager. He's a natural navigator, a basket maker, and a wild ricer too. He and I talk a lot about the direction that the wild food culture is taking, especially in light of social media. And Clay shares his thoughts on where he'd like to see the culture go next, with some really cool ideas about the future of plant and mushroom foraging literature. Along the way, we talk beaver trapping, sucker gigging, squirrel hunting, and a host of other things too. Talking to Clay, I'm reminded that while the pursuit of wild food is a noble and exciting adventure unto itself, the real reason we do it is the connection it gives us to the landscape and to the earth. Science and the Enlightenment have left many of us in a chaotic sea of technologically induced nihilism. When we head out on the land in pursuit of food, something's awakened in us, and that something tends to fall back to sleep when we haven't connected with nature for a while. And so, as humans continue to quote-unquote advance, and nature becomes more and more marginalized, the need to have a lifeline back to nature will become more and more important. As foragers, as hunters, as fishers, as wild food people in general, we've become, at least in part, stewards of humanity's most ancient practice, and we hold the doorway open for those who are trying to find a way back to the land. So it's about food, but really, it's about so much more. Clay Bowers, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we've been talking, I think this is the first time. Have we ever actually spoken voice to voice before? Is this the first time?
This is the very first time.
We've been writing on Instagram, and we've been writing through email and text for a couple of years now, I'd say, huh?
Yeah, probably 5 or so. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So it's I can't believe I haven't interviewed you before. You're so active in the wild food community where you are. Why don't you kind of tell people a little bit about what you do out where you are, who you are, where you are, and what you guys do out there?
Well, I am a resident of northern Lower Peninsula of Michigan, so I live in Traverse City. That's if you were to hold your hand up and make it look like a mitten, I live in the pinky, the end of the pinky. And we Michiganders, we do that, and everybody else thinks it's so funny. But I teach edible wild plants here, and well, and mushrooms as well here in northern Michigan. But also, I travel a bit. I've been expanding to southern Michigan this year, and I had planned to teach a class out in New York in the Adirondacks, but of course, 2020 hit, and we all know what that does. So, or did.
Yeah, exactly. Why do Michiganders it's funny how you guys sort of describe where you are there. Why is there such specific geographical information given when people are in Michigan and they're telling you where they live?
Michigan is, for those who've never been, have you ever been here?
Kind of through it, but I haven't spent a lot of time there. A little bit on foraging on the border, but that's it.
Okay, so Michigan has some very distinct differences as far as where you go in the state. Detroit, where I spent 8 years, or in the Metro Detroit region, I lived there for 8 years, is a completely different ecosystem as well as being a giant city. And then you get into northern Michigan and everything changes. In fact, we have something here called the Michigan Floristic Tension Zone. And for whatever reason, midway through the state, a ton of species just peter out, and you can watch them on the side of the highway as you're driving north. And vice versa, when you're driving south, all of the plant life changes. And this is a direct result of the ice age. We had ice sheets pushing tons and tons of sand onto the northern lower peninsula. And so our soils are very poor, very sandy, and only a specific number of species tend to like this soil type. So we say, uh, I live in Traverse City, and we point to the pinky, and people understand like kind of what you're talking about, the feeling, the vibes, the water's right by my house, and it's extremely different landscape than the lower part or even the upper peninsula.
There is though in that part of the country, and outside of Michigan too, but I'm just sort of saying in that region of North America, it seems to me that there's a dense concentration of well-known foragers out there. What you know what I'm saying? Like you're sort of in the same area as Sam Thayer, you're sort of in the same area as Alan Burgo. So it seems like there's quite I guess compared to the Northeast, there seems like there's a lot of you guys out there who are doing this at a kind of a high level. Am I perceiving that right?
Yeah, I would say that that's true. We have an event that was not, it did not happen this year, but we had an event called the Great Lakes Foragers Gathering for the last 7 years, I believe. And Sam would come out to it, Adam Harriton, and then
Yep.
we have teachers from Southern Michigan. That's Rachel Mifsud. She's teaches, and then we have Dwight from, I believe he lives in Wisconsin too. He does cordials. There's all kinds of neat people out here, and I have no idea why, but you are correct.
Yeah, that's really cool. Tell us more about sort of what you do in your blog space and on Instagram, and then also like sort of how people find your stuff online, your courses and whatnot.
So my Instagram is Clay. There's for whatever reason there's two underscores. I don't remember doing that, but apparently I did.
You wanted to really emphasize the
Yeah,
underscore.
yeah. So then two underscores Bowers, and you can find me on Instagram there. Also, my website is nomiforager.com, and that is like Northern Michigan forager. Um, and I write blogs. I also write for a couple of publications here in Northern Michigan as well. And my focus over the last couple years has been really to try and move away from this model of just telling people like how to identify plants or like what the scientific name might be. I have wanted to really expand into the territory of showing people why they should do this and the love and the beauty and the exercise of it and all the other stuff beyond just identification.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you kind of feel like that part of, because obviously when somebody comes into foraging, that's a really important piece. Um, but do you feel like it's sort of been saturated or enough has been said on it? Or do you feel like there's more to be said there, but you're wanting to expand sort of another aspect, another part of the category, so to speak?
In the hunting world, there are entire books of essays where people extol the virtues of being a hunter, and there's not one single mention of how to identify a deer or a rabbit. Um,
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
I really enjoy that. I really enjoy reading these beautiful essays written by people, and you can kind of put yourself in that situation and just feel what they're feeling when they write. And that's what I'm kind of aiming towards, is showing people the beauty of being out there, and even though it can sometimes be stressful, or there's a lot of physical labor, or it might be hard and somewhat, you might be in a cloud of mosquitoes picking blueberries, but it's still beautiful in the end. And I want to show people what that's like.
Let me zoom out of that for a second. Well, first, actually, I want to go back and say, um, I want people to get a sense of everything that you do out there before we go, because this is a really cool conversation. It's a conversation I haven't had with anybody before, and there's a few pieces that are springing to mind immediately that I'd like your feedback on. But you're a real generalist like me, and you don't just forage; you also hunt. And do you fish as well?
I do fish, but that's probably my least. Uh, I do that the least.
Okay, great. And then do you guys trap at all out there?
I do. I trap beaver and I trap muskrat for food.
Okay, great. So cool. I feel like I'm always saying, and I'm guilty of this. We created a sticker recently that I really like. I don't know if you got to see it. It's got like a rifle crossed with a fishing rod and then a foraging basket in the middle, and it says "Forage, hunt, fish." No, it says "Hunt, forage, fish." I think we put forage in the middle because the way the layout looked. But anyway, I forget often to mention trapping as a discipline as well, because when I think about how we approach wild food, it's like, okay, we hunt, we forage or gather, we fish, and then obviously trapping's a piece too. It's not a very popular modality anymore, and it's sort of looked at a little bit negatively by a lot of the public till they eat beaver,
Yeah.
right? And they're like, oh man, this is good. But all right, so you do that. You're also pretty serious about wild rice, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm actually going to be in Minnesota in 2 weeks.
Okay.
I
So I bring that up because that's such a serious caloric forage. So we're not just talking about a light plant identification or something like that. You're pretty serious down that road. So I think both of us, are at least qualified to have a conversation about looking at these things from a bigger picture, looking at all the wild food modalities. So from that place, I want to talk about the literature that exists in these categories. So let's say hunting is a category. We'll say fishing's a category. Obviously, there's tons of subcategories. We'll say trapping, and then foraging as these different wild, and then let's say cooking too. I
Mhm.
want to kind of quickly get your impressions of the literature on those different topics, and then we'll go through and talk about how you'd like to see it shift in the foraging literature.
Mhm.
So let's start with, like you were sort of saying, on hunting, because I'll say that for me, most of the hunting literature kind of sucks. But I don't read a lot of those. I forgot that there are so many of those essays that are sort of approach the philosophy. I've looked for a lot of how-to type books in hunting, and there's not much. So I lament that there, as somebody who learned to hunt as an adult, I wish there was more books like what there is in foraging, which gives I wish there was a Sam Thayer writing on hunting. That'd
Yeah.
be super helpful to me. I don't need help identifying a white-tailed deer, but somebody who really broke down, like he breaks things down into the specific tactics and strategies. There isn't much of that. So I'll add that piece. And then I'd love to hear your perspective on what's really great, or what's bad, but what's really great in the hunting literature that you're sort of referring to.
What's really great is, and when I refer to the hunting literature, most of my reading has been done on books of the past. So Sand County Almanac, other books where
Oh, right.
you know where people are just extolling the virtues of nature and why they love it and why hunting brings them into this space of love. And I feel the exact same way about foraging. So for me, food is one aspect of it, and I love eating the food that I get from hunting or foraging or fishing or even trapping. But another aspect of it is not being tied to my phone, not being at a job, not being in a place where I have any other thing to do but just sit there and listen to the beautiful sounds of nature, whether that be silence or not.
Well, okay, hang on. I agree with you. You're getting ahead of me. I want to lay this out first. This is interesting to me. So let's come back to that, and we'll
Okay.
talk about those aspects of foraging. How have you perceived? Because when I look at the fishing literature, I notice that it's broken into two parts. One is there's a lot of fly fishing literature. One would almost get the impression that people who don't fly fish aren't even literate or something. Where's all the books? Because on fly fishing, there's just endless written about flies themselves and tying flies, about casting, about the art of it, and then a lot of philosophical stories about the river. A lot of philosophical stories about the relationship of people to the river and to trout and things like that. And then when you go on to the outside of fly fishing, the literature breaks down quite a bit. There's a lot of fishing storybooks.
Yeah.
They tend to be sort of written in like a humorous tongue-in-cheek style, like fish stories gone wrong kind of books.
Hmm.
And then when you try to, and then there is some how-to stuff more than in hunting, but it tends to be pretty basic and not that really in depth. So that's my perception of the fishing literature. Do you have any perceptions of it?
Uh, of the literatures that I have read in regards to all these, fishing has been the least. I have read a few books by Mark Kurlansky. Um,
Oh yeah, those are big pictures about the fisheries and about the
exactly.
sort of how the history through fishing.
Yep. And I like all
Yeah.
information. I love reading books about informative books, but I do also like to read the books that just take you to the place. And there
Yeah.
is little gems of that in Mark Kurlansky's book.
Lots of it.
Yeah.
Lots of it.
So,
Real quick story. I have interviewed Mark Kurlansky twice,
yep.
and both times had such serious technical problems. I actually spoke to him twice in the last month. And I'm like, both times the interview came unglued due to technical problems. But he is a cool dude, and I like his books a lot. So I hadn't really thought about those, but yeah, because there's also like people like Paul Greenberg who've written some books too, about, I guess, about fish. So yeah, there is that. There isn't really an equivalent in foraging to those kind of books either. Who does that? He wrote the book Upstream. Anyway, I'll find it. So, but anyway, outside of him, I'm just trying to think of who writes sort of about foraging in that way. Is there anyone you can think of?
Sam does write a little bit about it in the ends of his books. And I would say Arthur seems to write a little bit about it, like maybe on his website. But
True. Yeah, true. Langdon Cook's who I was trying to think of
yep,
before, by the way.
I know. You said his name, and I knew it immediately.
And his book on trout is awesome. Upstream is amazing.
I have not
Yeah.
read that, but I have read the book on mushrooms that you're talking about.
Okay. Now Sam's writing, I wish sometimes there was more. Like he does little essays with his book, right? And I'm his books, and I'm thinking of one of the essays he wrote on ecoculture.
Yep.
Just really opened my mind up. Like it was like stuff I'd never read anywhere before, looking at ecoculture, wild fooding as a alternative to agriculture. It was just a fascinating way that he put it together. But yeah, there, his books tend to be ID and how to use, right?
Yep. Exactly. So
And Arthur's written a lot of philosophy, like in his book. What is his main book called? A New Path.
a new path. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a lot there too, but not specifically foraging as much as philosophy about wildness.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay, so then what about in trapping, where I see mostly is like nostalgia about mountain men.
Yep.
That's all I've seen, really.
Unfortunately, that's it. That's all it is. Typically, is mountain men, and unfortunately as well. And I can verify this from real life. I don't know that many trappers that don't fit the stereotype of like a hillbilly that doesn't really. So
Oh
I
man,
go out.
I'm in Maine, so it's a little different, but yeah.
Yeah, I go out and trap, and I don't encounter too many trappers, but I go out and trap, and to me, it's like one of my most favorite things in the entire world to do. And it's because it is such problem solving. Do you know what I mean?
Say please. Yeah, but I don't trap much. I have a little experience with beavers and very little. So if I would love for you to expand on that, and I do want to get to talking about foraging literature here, but this is a neat little segue. And I bring it up for a couple reasons. So hold your thought here. Our producer Grant and I went and did the trapper safety course, which you have to have here in Maine if you want to get a trapping license. And getting a trapping license here is weird. You have to actually go to the state capitol and get it in person once a year. They don't let you get it online like you can a fishing or hunting license for some reason. But when we took the course, I was expecting the regular hunter safety course, which honestly is a very, very low level course. I was blown away at how good the course was, but also how hard it was to find. There's very few of them because trapping's so unpopular now. When we did the course, so much of it was dedicated to the perception of trapping in the public eye because of animal rights kind of activists and the kind of imagery that a lot of people have seen. Trapping is very unsavory as an idea to most people who aren't aware of how it really works and whatnot. So trapping seems to be, and then as you mentioned before, if you want to find guys who look like Daniel Boone, go to one of the trappers meetings. They don't even call them trappers meetings. What do they call them? Like rendezvous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everybody's in buckskins and beaver hats and stuff. It's quite a scene. It is unusual to meet like regular people who trap, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
What were you going to say about it a moment ago? One of your favorite things to do because it's problem solving, you were saying.
It's amazing. I can't extol the virtues enough. I love going out into a canoe and I'll just spend hours looking for sign, figuring out where animals are moving, what patterns they're taking, what kind of foods they're interested in, and finding the entryways to their lodges. It's amazing, so it takes a lot of dedicated work and forethought to be able to even trap a beaver. It's not just going out willy-nilly throwing foothold traps wherever you think and then leaving and coming back in 5 days like the media would make it seem.
Right. One of the cool things to me is the idea that you as somebody who hunts primarily for protein or fishes, the idea that I think of angling, I should say that. I think of angling as managing an active trap,
Yep.
Because I've thought a lot about it. Like a fishing rod isn't really a weapon.
Yep.
It's more of a trap that you're hanging on to, right? So I kind of get that sense, but when I'm fishing, I'm pretty much manning the rod. So there's something cool about the idea that your traps work for you when you're not there.
I love it. And actually, so in my deep dreams of future weird apocalypses, I always think I'll trap everything. We're not allowed to now. And we used to be able to trap cottontail rabbits in the past. And we're not allowed to anymore. But
with snares, are you allowed to snare?
No, we are not allowed to snare. And
Same here.
I got some friends that live in Ontario, and all winter long they're posting their snare sets and how they're snaring cottontails, and I'm just seriously jealous.
I also have noticed that. All right, let me see if I can put this together right. Do you spend any time in the primitive skills world or go to any of those kind of gatherings ever?
So,
because you do basket making and stuff, right?
Yeah. So I got my origins and all of this stuff kind of happened. Well, one from dumpster diving a long time ago, and then I got
oh no,
and then I got really into free food, right? So that's how I kind of got started there.
That's how you got here.
Yeah, and
were you an anarchist?
Yeah, I was kind of like a punk. That sort of that whole sort of thing, and obviously I'm
Sure.
completely different from that now, but I think that
you've matured.
Yeah, exactly. I've matured. So I kind of got my origins in that, and then I got invited to primitive skills groups, and from there is where all of this has kind of come from for me, and that all began about 16 years ago. I'd say I got introduced to my first primitive skills group.
Okay, there's this type of punk that you see in the city that wears like dirty denim and leather, and they always have like a pit bull.
Yeah,
you see them panhandling everywhere in the country, right? Do you have a name for those guys?
Crust punks.
Crust, that's what we call them too. Okay. The distance between crust punk I don't mean this like this is not an insult. This is like a logistical thing. The distance between crust punk and primitive skills gathering is not that far. There's like a do you know what I mean by that? I don't want to
Yeah,
offend anybody, but there's almost like a cross pollination, not typically going from primitive skills to crust punk, but there does
yeah,
seem to be this crust punk to primitive skills journey. Do you know what I'm
yeah.
talking about there?
I
Yeah.
know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay,
Yeah,
there's this fun. That's a funny thing to me. Okay, and because of that kind of thing, and because of the general sort of when I say anarchist, I don't mean Antifa, but I mean this sort of like general anarchist theme in the primitive skills world, or because it attracts a lot of people from that. Because there's a lot of people in that world that have nothing to do with that world at all, of course,
yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
Because also in the primitive skills world, you meet professors and you meet scientists and all kinds of characters. But because there's a lot of anarchists there, and that like dumpster diving thing that you were talking about,
Hmm.
I noticed that a lot of them will learn about some hunting and gathering and trapping from a primitive skills perspective. And sometimes I'm amazed it's like they don't know how the laws of hunting and trapping work. So I'll see them doing things where it's like, man, if you got caught doing that, you're going to get
Hmm.
a poaching charge. And I don't think you realize how serious that can be. But I'll see people like learn a trap and then they're going out doing it, that like a deadfall trap or a snare that's like completely against the laws. But often there's like a disconnect between the hunting that people learn in primitive skills and what's actually going on in the modern day world of hunting and gathering legally. Does that make sense? I've never
Oh
talked
yeah,
about that before, but sometimes I see people doing things. I'm like, ooh, man, don't get caught doing that.
yeah. I see YouTube videos constantly of people using fish traps and like basket traps, and I'm always thinking the same thing. Like that's totally illegal. I don't know how you post that.
Yeah, how you post it. At the same time, I love all those skills. They're so cool and useful, and I think that it's really important they get kept alive. But yeah, it's like explain that to the warden or whatever when you're using an illegal method of take.
Yep,
But anyway,
exactly.
so I appreciate what you're saying. So you came at it from that perspective, though you were saying, and I kind of interrupted you there to talk about crust punks, but
Yeah, no, it's all
but
good.
that's where you kind of it got introduced to trapping. You were saying,
Yeah, so no, I mean trapping took a little bit longer. So I started my journey is what I was saying is
oh, okay,
doing all that, and then essentially it just became an obsession of mine, like procuring food of all kind from the wild.
yeah,
So what started as me living in the Metro Detroit region, and then actually at a punk show being handed a flyer with a couple of wild edibles on it, and
oh,
uh,
cool.
it got handed to me, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. You can just get free food. And it had two plants on it. It had mulberries and it had lamb's quarters.
As like a how-to kind of a pamphlet.
Yeah, just kind of like a little pamphlet with these
Ah, like a little zine.
yeah, like a little zine, exactly. And I
Cool.
and I can honestly say that that zine changed my life. Like if I hadn't picked up that zine, I wouldn't be here now. I
Wow.
yeah, so that was a long time ago, and I got handed that zine, and I from that time on forward have just been basically obsessed. I mean, I think it's a good obsession to have, but it is an obsession. Like a couple years ago, I went to Maine and I harvested seawater and made my own sea salt.
Yeah.
Y-
Yeah.
y- like so. I've tried to do
Deep, bro. You're
everything
you're in deep.
exactly.
You're in so deep. Yeah, I can't I have a different origin story, but I did come through the punk scene and the hardcore scene, and that led me to become a raw food vegan. I became a vegan through that's kind of straight edge hardcore scene. And that's sort of like how I got into food too. And then food became a much bigger and more important thing to me than my sort of teen angst about music or whatever. But it did lead me to that stuff too. So it's kind of fun to talk to somebody who has a similar background. Um, but I get what you're saying too about it being an obsession. And I appreciate what you're saying right now because, and this is what I call generalism around wild foods. I keep going back and forth on this thing. It's like, I'm a hunter. I love hunting. And of all
Mhm.
the disciplines, it's probably where I feel the most at home. But I struggle to I don't think of myself as a hunter the way that a lot of people I know do. I think of hunting as one of the modalities with which I get food.
Yeah,
And that's more important to me than the identity of a hunter. Similarly, like I don't identify as a fisherman as much as I or angler as much as I do as a wild food person.
Yeah.
And so foraging is easy because when I say forager, I think of the word foraging in the anthropological sense. It means to gather wild foods generally.
Ah,
But I don't mean it as just like a plant thing. You know what I mean? I feel like you're kind of probably similar to that.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I get pegged often as like a wild food guy, especially here in my hometown. Um,
Yep.
but I'm trying to expand my horizons beyond that. I want to start writing next year about like I have other passions too. Like squirrel hunting is a passion of mine. I like sucker, which I know you don't like.
I
but
like suckers. I love them. What do you mean I don't like them?
oh, okay. I thought you said you didn't like the taste of them. Um,
Oh, I have had. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. So I'll let you finish what you're saying. Let's come back to suckers and talk about that.
so I've written historically mostly about foraging and my views toward the world about.
Oh, when you said a minute ago, I'm kind of seen as a wild food guy. You mean as like a plant and mushroom guy?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Got it.
And
Yep.
and so I get pegged into that, and then people think, oh, he's just a plant guy, and I want to get people to understand that I am a generalist, like you say. When I go out squirrel hunting, I also will pick acorns if I see them. Uh, when I'm down in lower Michigan, I'll pick hickory nuts, and I will also, if I see mushrooms, I'll pick mushrooms. I'll just do everything I can at the same time because to me, it's about procuring food for the table. It's not about just going out and getting one species.
Got it. Yeah, I was last year. I was on the trail of a bear with some guys from Wisconsin, and it turned out to be the biggest bear I've ever actually gotten to see. Biggest bear a lot of us had seen. Uh, on the way to the tree, we stopped to take a breath because we're running kind of vertically. And where we stop, I'm like, "Hey, am I talkie?" And I go grab it and go to put it in my bag. And these guys are like, "What are you?" You know what I mean? Because we're on like a mission to get to the dogs. And I'm like, "Bro, trust me, you're gonna want to try this later. You're gonna be glad I stopped when I share this with you. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's a funny thing because people who identify solely as hunters, they're kind of like, "Dude, what are you doing? Why
yeah.
are you doing that?" But I like this approach you're taking. So you're wanting to start bringing in more of the hunting and fishing that you do into your writing. You're saying,
Yep, exactly. And just more about, like I said before, expanding into like why these things create peace and harmony in my life and they make me happy.
okay, and I want to come back to that next, but first, let's talk about suckers.
Okay.
I want to clear the air here. I actually have quite a bit of footage of not only for WildFed for the show, not only of gigging suckers, but also cleaning them and then turning them into food. So they are something I really like, but they aren't something I like as much as haddock or pollock or salmon or something.
Mhm.
Feel like I have to work with them a little bit, and so I want to talk about that too. More than anything, I gotta say I love fishing for them in the spring when it's been winter and all of a sudden there's something to do after maple and
Yeah.
it's right around when I'm turkey hunting. So talk to people about suckers and describe how you go after them and what you like doing with them.
Okay, so first of all, I have to lay the groundwork here. You can gig them, which to most people that means spear them. I cannot do that in northern Michigan. Not We have what's called designated trout streams in Michigan, and almost every single stream in northern Michigan is a designated trout stream. So in order for me to procure them not angling, I have to dip net them, but I can only net them within a half mile of Lake Michigan on any stream.
Wow. Okay. Hey, let's back up and describe a little ecologically about what's going on with suckers in the spring, and then we'll come back to that because that's pretty restrictive. I feel like dip netting them is probably not that hard, but it sounds like you're only allowed to go certain places.
Yep.
So as I understand it, what's going on with suckers is first thing in the spring, basically right after the thaw, when the brooks are still really swollen and they're meltwater's running down into the lakes and ponds. These suckers who spend their time in the deep water come up into the shallows and enter into those lake inlets,
Yep.
and basically fairly close to the lakes they rub against each other, spawn, and then head back in after a couple of weeks. So anything you want to add to that, say more about that?
Nope, that's pretty much it. I mean, we have, I don't know what it looks like in Maine, but we have the Great Lakes here. So almost every single stream has a sucker run. So
Yeah.
we have, uh, I mean, I don't know if you,
How deep is the lake?
the Great Lakes, like
Yeah. Well, the lakes for you.
um, near me, it can get to be 700 feet in some,
Oh my gosh.
in some,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
There are places. It's not like you go for a dip and you're over 700 feet. You got to go quite a ways up.
Drops off. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I get that, but still, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So we have all kinds of cool fish as a result. We have burbot, which also are called lawyers.
Yeah, we call them cusk up here. I love those fish, man.
Yeah, they are delicious, but unfortunately, they're pretty hard to get. They don't really come up within, like, we can spear them legally in Michigan, but I can't. You don't ever see them. So,
Oh, you guys spear them. I catch them through the ice in the winter
well, you can catch them
on.
in the ice and through the winter as well, but they're so deep. They're 100 feet plus here usually.
Oh, okay, we catch them in like 4 or 5 feet of water when they come up to feed in the shallows at night in the winter. But I don't ever see them in the summer, or they're in the open water season.
Okay. Well, so anyway, the suckers here. We live in an area where there are streams and creeks and rivers almost everywhere you go in Michigan, basically. So, and all of those have sucker runs. And like I said, though, all of them are designated trout streams. In the southern half of the state, a lot of those are not designated trout streams, but then also you're dealing with pollution issues. So it's like a catch
Yeah.
22. I don't really want to go spearing in a lake or a river that I know is pretty polluted.
Right. So the suckers are strange fish because they have very primitive looking palpulose lips. They don't have. Do they even have a jaw?
I don't know.
It's just like this sort of big, like you'd picture suckers like you'd see in an aquarium stuck to the side of the glass.
Yep.
These fish use their mouths to feed on rocks and debris and detritus at the lake bottom. And so we don't see them usually until the spring when they come up to spawn. It's just that short period. Now, as what I'm doing is I actually right now, at least, what I have is like a banister, like a railing from lumber yard,
Yep.
like you'd put install on a staircase with a gig on the end, like a 5-prong gig, and I'm spearing them in shallow water. My experience is if I just filleted them and cooked them, they we'll talk about the bones later maybe, but they tend to have a lake bottom flavor if I don't remove all of the red fat from their midline, similar to a catfish. So are you having that experience, or are you like, dude, that's not even happening here?
Um, I don't have that experience, but I have noticed this conversation with other fish in the fishing world, and
Yeah.
one of those things is based on what they eat. So
Yep.
lake trout used to be here regarded as absolute trash fish, and then in the last 15 years, you've seen a complete resurgence, and now lake trout is very popular. And one of the things that they've started switching to big time is we have an invasive goby, and this round goby is taking over, and these lake trout are getting magnificently huge as a result.
Oh, okay.
And apparently, they taste better than they once did. So I don't know what.
Okay, because everybody calls them mud hens here, and I find lake trout to be delicious. But they're a char. I mean, like a brook trout. They're
Yeah.
in the same family as brook trout. So it's like, of course, this is a delicious fish. The sucker, I just find, and the other thing is, a sucker has all of those Y bones
Yep.
that are kind of difficult to deal with. So, anyway, for clarity, what I am doing with them now is I fillet them, I skin them, I take out all the midline, all that maroon fat,
Yep.
and then I cut it up into small cubes, bread, and fry it for tacos. That way, the frying in the small pieces gets rid of the Y bones, breaks them down till they're I can easily crunch them. I wouldn't want to eat sucker every day, but I really like it in the spring. Just
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you. It's just something that I can do, and I wouldn't advise, at least here in the Great Lakes anyway, I wouldn't advise people eat them every day anyway because of our PCBs.
Yeah.
So
But they are a vegetarian fish, right? So, or a scavenging fish. So I think they must have pretty clean, even in a polluted area. Not like, because you tend to have that trophic cascade with PCBs, right? It sort of builds up through predation.
yeah,
I think quite a bit.
exactly. But I think that I have a friend who works for the local tribe here, and he has told me that even then, you're probably not supposed to eat any more than maybe 8 meals per
A year.
Yeah, or something like that. And
Sure.
unfortunately, people in the past were not thinking about these things.
Right. Okay.
But fortunately, just sediment deposits alone are going to completely cover PCBs and most toxins that have been put into the Great Lakes. I think they think by the year 2037.
Great.
So,
It'd be a great fishing year.
yeah, exactly. So,
That's cool. I kind of like when I like fishing that isn't done with a rod and reel.
I love it. I love it so much. It's so much better to me. It's
Yeah, and it's sight fishing too, which is nice.
Yeah. So I have I made that discovery basically a couple years ago with netting fish, and I haven't really wanted to go back. When I use a rod and reel, it's just kind of, I don't know. It's like the old everybody thinks fishing is boring thing. Well, that kind of fits me. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is to me. Like it just seems kind of like inactive and a little bit boring.
All right, you're going fishing with me next time you're here, and I'm going to show you some not inactive fishing. Because I would just want to say in defense of that, but I think that a lot of the fishing I was exposed to as a kid was boring.
Yeah.
Where people are like sit there with a bobber and a worm and just nothing ever happens.
Yeah.
I do want to say when you know where the fish are when they are, and you have extremely precise targeting, it can be nonstop action. But if you're kind of just like, oh yeah, what I do is go down and throw a worm off the bridge or whatever, yeah, it can be pretty dull. But I do, back to what we were saying, there's something about you can see the fish and you get to, like, I imagine with those suckers, you have to stock up a little bit, right? You can't just walk up there and jump in the water and start netting. You got to like slink, and it's a hunt, right?
Yep, it's definitely a hunt for sure. Yep, and then we do something similar as well with the fish. We will, we actually this year pressure canned it, which completely takes care of the Y bones.
Of those bones.
Yep. And that serves as kind of like a local tuna fish sort of thing.
Skin on or skin off?
No, I always take the skin off.
Yep.
Do
you trim any of that fat, or are you leaving that on there?
I just leave it on.
and it tastes all right to you when you cook it?
Yeah, it tastes fine. And in fact, my kids love it too. So I can't...
yeah, well, if your kids like it, it's good. The thing that I've heard too, although I don't have like sources for this or anything, but something I've always been told is that the particular, I don't know if it's microalgae or if it's bacteria, but there are things in the water that if they proliferate a lot will give that sort of muddy flavor to a freshwater fish. And so sometimes, somebody tries a lake trout, it tastes muddy. It's because there was a bloom of something at the time and they go, oh, lake trout are muddy. And it's like, well, that lake trout was muddy tasting, but they're not always like that. So that could be part of what's going on too. But I want to hear about we'll come back to in a moment, the sort of philosophical piece, which I think is the real thrust of what we want to talk about. But I want to hear about how you squirrel hunt, because squirrel hunting is one of those things that I've seen quite a few different styles and methods. And I think because it's for me, of all the hunting, there's something really special about squirrel hunting because I can do it. There's something romantic about it. I just taken my light little 22 out into the woods by myself. I just have the most beautiful time. And so it's become a very personal thing. And I have lots of little techniques that are my personalized method. So I'd love to hear about how you squirrel hunt and, why it's something you see yourself writing about. We'll get right back to the show in a moment. But recently I've been telling you about the incredible sandals from Earth Runners. They're based on the ancient Hirachi sandal design, but they've been updated with modern materials and new functionality. Every pair of Earth Runners is built on a Vibram sole, but they offer 3 models, each with differing thicknesses, so you can customize your minimalist experience. Lately, I've been wearing a pair of their Alphas when I'm out trout fishing in cobblestone-bottomed mountain stream beds. At 12 millimeters, the Alpha are their thickest soled sandal, but like all Earth Runners, they come equipped with their signature conductive lacing and copper outsole plug. You don't notice them being there, but those features make every pair of Earth Runners electrically grounded, effectively reconnecting you to the ground the way that natural animals are all the time. If you're looking for a truly minimalist shoe experience, check out their Elemental Adventure Sandal. Or if you want to try something in between, check out their most popular model, the Circadians. Earth Runners are based on the design that allowed our ancestors to hunt and gather over extensive tracts of land. Now earth runners are reconnecting people and landscapes, both physically and electrically. Take a pair of earth runners out on your next wild food adventure. Use the coupon code WildFed and get 10% off your order. Earth runners, designed by your ancestors, modernized for you. Find them at earthrunners.com. Now, back to the show.
I love squirrel hunting for basically the same reasons that you just said. I love going out there. I love, I've got a 22. It's not a top of the line.
What kind of 22 do you like?
It's funny. I got this 22 at a gun show. It cost me $100 and, I don't even know the name.
Use that gun show loophole, didn't you?
Yeah, I used the gun show loophole. Yeah. So, well, I'll tell you the story really quick. I did not have a 22. I had an air rifle, and I had terrible results with shooting squirrels. I was injuring them, and
you need the right air rifle for they exist, but the one that the Daisy isn't going to do the job.
Well, so I had a terrible air rifle, and I would often come home empty-handed. And my girlfriend Madeline, she said, she thought that I was just a terrible hunter, and
that made you feel good about yourself.
Yeah, no. So I one day I just up and decided I'm gonna go, and I found out there was a gun show. I said I'm gonna go get a 22. I just brought $100 with me. I go and I buy a 22, and the very next day I go out and I got my limit, which here is 5 squirrels. And I got my limit. Nice. I got my limit in an hour and 45 minutes. And I came home and she says to me, "Oh my God, I thought you were just a bad hunter."
You're like, "Get ready, we're eating tonight."
Yeah. So I love squirrel hunting. I love I will take my son with me, or my daughter too sometimes if she wants to come. But we go out, and if it's just me, I love it. I love the solitude. I love the going out, and oftentimes it's cold, and I love cold weather. And I love attuning all my senses to try and find this animal that really doesn't want you to see it.
Yeah, let's talk about real quick. What do you say to people who say to you, "Squirrel hunting, dude, come to my yard. They're all over the place." Dude, squirrel hunting, if you could just walk up and grab the squirrels where I am, it's like, dude, you just have never, trust me, come squirrel hunting. Watch how they behave. Because people, have you noticed that people have like a really screwy kind of idea about squirrels because they're used to tame squirrels in parks and stuff?
Yeah.
And they're on their front lawn.
Oh, it's constant. When I tell people I'm a squirrel hunter, they act like, you just said, "Oh, like I hunt at a grocery store."
Right. I hunt ground beef.
Yeah, it's like they act like it's so simple, and like, I can't believe you would even imagine to call yourself a hunter. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The squirrels,
because it's like if somebody said to you, like, it's like if they saw you at a family gathering every day, and they're like, "When that guy walks through the dark alley, I'm going to rob him because I see how much he's not paying attention whenever he's at those family gatherings." It's like, dude, when I'm at a family gathering, I'm behaving very differently than when I'm in a dark alley in a city I'm not familiar with. You know what I mean? I'm a different person.
Yeah.
So like a squirrel in a park that's been there they've been there generations, and no one's allowed to hunt, and they just know they're safe there. They get used to people, no problem. Once they're in the woods and you come in there in a sort of 3/4 squat walk with a rifle, they're like extremely aware of predation.
Oh yeah. I mean, not only that, but you got foxes, and you have,
coyotes.
Yep. And then you have airborne predation we have a lot of red-tailed hawks here. Those squirrels are
owls.
Yeah. So for me, when I go out, typically what I'll do is I'll find an area with a lot of mast crops, so a lot of acorns. We don't have in northern Michigan, one of those trees that we don't have as a result of that Michigan floristic tension zone that I spoke of earlier is we don't have hickory nuts here. We don't have hazelnuts here. So predominantly what I'm looking for is oaks and beech nuts. And if we have those two, then I can pretty much guarantee that I'll find squirrels, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be easy to see.
Mm-hmm.
So
are you hunting fox squirrels or gray squirrels?
We do not have As far as I'm aware, I have yet to see a fox squirrel in northern Michigan.
Do you have black phase gray squirrels or all gray?
Yeah, I have the black phase. Like, and in fact, like I would say the majority of the squirrels that we have are black phase.
Can I come squirrel hunting with you? Because I love squirrel hunting. It's just like when I'm an old man, I picture I want to do kind of three things. I want to like fish for little brook trout. I want to squirrel hunt, and I want to do astronomy. Those are like my kind of that's my old man phase out of life plan. Aside from like, hanging out with my wife and stuff. So that, but as a result, I'm so fascinated when I'm traveling and I see color phase squirrels, because we don't really see them here. That's really cool. I think I'd do like hides.
Yeah, I actually forget a lot of times that it is odd to have black squirrels.
It is. Tell me, once you get your squirrels, walk me through. Well, actually, no, I want to hear more about what your hunting style's like, and then we'll talk about, eating them.
So as far as hunting them goes, I tend to just do a really slow walk, and I just kind of keep my eyes and my senses open, and I listen for everything possible because you can hear them make little sounds. And then sometimes I will just make a little squirrel call with my mouth. And believe it or not, I've had squirrels run within 5 feet of
Right
me.
up to it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even using like any call that I bought at the store. That's just using my mouth. Um, and I can't believe it when that happens. It's pretty unbelievable. Um,
That sound they make, that's like somewhere between a bark and a baby crying.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's what I do, and then I don't. I like I said, I use the 22. Typically, I'm trying to shoot them when they're stationary, and you do encounter that problem when you're alone. I don't know if you encounter this, but they circle the tree.
mm-hmm. As
Yeah.
you're
So,
moving around the tree, they're like the moon and the earth. They're perfectly on the 180 of the tree every time you come around.
yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
so if my son is with me, I'll have him run around the other side, and then that's kind of
Pushing
like,
around.
yep, exactly.
One of
So,
their weaknesses I've noticed, because I think a big part of hunting, this sounds mean when you say it, but I guess, that's what hunting is exploiting the weaknesses
yep,
of another animal. So it's like with turkeys, I'm thinking like they can't smell. I don't have to
yeah,
worry about that. You know what I mean? With deer, it's like they don't see certain colors, things like that you learn how to exploit. With squirrels, it's like they just can't keep track of where all the fluff of their tail is. So he's hiding so well. He's perfectly, also how they can lay themselves so flat. Like if
yep,
they're up on a branch and they can lay so flat, you wouldn't know they were there, except I see a little tuft of hair in the breeze from their tail. It's like
yep,
busted.
yep. Do you use binoculars?
Yeah, I bring binoculars on my chest.
Uh
I
huh.
bring like a sack that is a decoy bag that I wear because I need somewhere to put them all. And I bring a 22. That's like my main kit. And I bring actually a little Primos collar around my neck.
So you have decoys, squirrel decoys?
No, sorry. It's a turkey decoy bag that is just
Oh,
a sack that I find useful for holding. Because what I'll do is, like you were saying, I'll fill that thing with acorns the whole time I'm out there, and then I'll just throw
ah,
dead squirrels right in on there. They bleed on the acorns a little bit, but like, whatever. I'm gonna shell them, so I don't care. And
yeah.
so I'll carry that. Yeah, I don't have any decoy squirrels. That's funny, but I do have a little squirrel call. That's like kind of like you squeeze like a little rubber diaphragm thing over a plastic kind of end piece, and it makes a very realistic squirrel call.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah, I use I think without binoculars, I think it would be significantly more challenging.
Really? So I'm gonna have to try. I've never even used binoculars.
Oh, you don't use them? Oh
No.
man. Oh, I mean, well, it sounds like you're doing pretty well, but I mean, because my method is like, once I find a squirrel and I kill him, I notice that almost always when I shoot, there's going to be squirrels who bark in response to the shot. And
Yeah.
then I'm on to find them. But usually I end up locating them through the binoculars 50% of the time before I get to them.
Okay, I see. Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, whatever. Not that
yeah,
important.
I have
Do you use a
never.
scope on the 22?
Do I use? Yeah, I have a scope. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a buddy who's an iron sight nutcase. He will not get a scope.
Tell him if he doesn't. Tell him I said if you're not driving a horse and buggy, I don't want to hear about this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to do that. But yeah, so squirrel hunting is definitely like my favorite type of hunting. I love all of the other hunting, but I as I said with the fishing, like I like being active. So for
Mhm.
me, being able to like walk around, like I can bend over and pick some acorns, I can do whatever, and then I get to like get exercise in the winter while everybody's complaining about how cold it is, you know.
Yeah, and when you're deer hunting, every little thing you do has such a huge impact to the
Yep.
hunt. Whereas when you're squirrel hunting, you could almost have like a party and run around and make a bunch of noise, and then 100 yards later, you're back in the hunt. Do you know what I mean? Whereas a
Yeah.
deer would have scooted out of there a long time ago. So you can kind of, what I like about it too is you can forage along the way. You can be checking out tracks. You can be looking for sign. You can be doing 20 other things and be squirrel hunting, because I'm really able to pay attention to the environment more. I feel like when I'm deer hunting, I'm so focused on being not like being a ghost that
Yeah.
it's harder to be doing everything else. Once you get a squirrel, do you do the step on the tail skinning method, or do you skin them sort of shirts and pants?
Shirts and pants kind of way.
Me too.
I would like to learn the step on the tail thing. I have yet to do it though.
I feel like I don't wear the right shoes, because if you don't have like, if you wear like a traditional hardcore hunting boot, it works great. But if you don't, I tend to wear like softer bottom shoes, things that keep me more in contact with the ground, but they suck for doing that method. So I'm shirts and pants too. How do you cook them?
So we have two predominant ways in our household, and one is uh, we quarter them and then we just fry them in like acorn flour or whatever kind of flour. Like we might use like not wheat, but like something some gluten free
Corn or
flour.
something?
Yeah, and
Mhm.
then the favorite in the house though, and like what gets my kids all jacked up about eating squirrels is my girlfriend is an amazing baker. She actually went to baking school, and so she'll
Oh, convenient.
so she'll make sourdough pasties. So I don't know, like a pasty is a real Michigan Upper Peninsula thing, and I don't know if you know.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what a pasty
I,
is?
no, I don't.
Okay, so a pasty is it's like basically like a Finnish hot pocket. So like the Upper
You
Peninsula,
had me at hot pocket.
it's like Finnish people moved in droves to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I have no idea why, but they brought with them this thing called a pasty, and the pasty is like it's like flour that's been cooked, and then you wrap it around potatoes, carrots, onions, or whatever, and then you put a meat of your choice in there. And so she will make us. I'll save up about 10 squirrels because that's what the I can have in my house at any one time. That's my possession limit.
We're at 8. You're still, because you can have double your bag limit basically.
Yep, exactly. So I can have,
All right, we're 4.
yeah, so I'll do 10 squirrels and then I'll throw them all in the crock pot for a day. And then I let those cook until they're just super easy to pull from the bones. And then I just sit there and I pull all the meat and then we throw those into pasties and then we'll use, whatever.
How are you cooking it when you do that? Before you pull the meat?
Before I pull the meat, I throw them into a crock pot and I'll put a bunch of different spices, things like wild bergamot, thyme. We'll even throw birch polypore and reishi in the crock pot with them.
Yeah,
You know,
infuse them with stuff. How long do you have them in there?
I like I said, I do it like a day. Like
Okay, so you got like a braised meat comes off like a pulled
yep,
beef or something.
exactly. And then my girlfriend she makes these sourdough pasties. So we'll do
Oh, that sounds awesome.
and we'll just have stacks and stacks of them. Like because you
So
don't.
it's like an empanada kind of?
Yeah, it's kind of like an empanada, sort of. Um,
Okay.
but they're absolutely delicious. Like I said, I can't keep my kids away from them.
Right, right, right.
uh, they're wonderful. They're cool, and it goes with the tradition of like, which is another cool thing I would like to talk about if I can is that like we in this like globalized world like we everything is the same everywhere.
Yes.
I love having the fact that like I can say a pasty and somebody's like what's a pasty you know
Yeah, things that are regional, right?
yeah so that is we go to the Upper Peninsula a lot because it's a really beautiful and desolate place. And in fact, it looks a lot like Maine. Um,
Okay. Hey, we're
we
not desolate.
But we were just up in the Upper Peninsula. I went 2 times within the last couple weeks because to harvest blueberries, and everywhere you go, there's a sign for pasties.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
Okay. I know what you mean. Like when there's like I was in Newfoundland last year, and it was just like so nice to be in a place where almost every single thing was regional. It
yeah,
was like nothing from home was there, and we're not that far away. And it was so refreshing because I've gotten used to that like homogenous corporate homogeneity that is like everywhere. And, you know, anyway, I appreciate what you're saying. When you say quarter a squirrel, because that's what I say too, but I'm actually taking 5 parts. Do you guys take that center part that has the loins and tenderloins along the spine?
sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends on how big the squirrel is.
Okay, that's like my favorite piece. So I wanted to ask you that too, because I take the two. I got if I can, normally I'm going to take heart and liver, and eat those fresh, unless I've damaged them with the shot. Which is why I can't imagine shooting squirrels with iron sights.
Yeah,
I'm like a ballistics nerd, and I don't care how good of a shooter you are. When you're shooting iron sights, they cover a lot of your target. So when you have a small target, at let's say you're at 30 yards on iron sights, good luck, aiming at specifically at the ear. It's very hard to do.
yeah,
So I think without glass, I just can't. I can't picture going back to iron sights. I mean, I'm moving up to optics on my pistols now, even too. So it's like I'm really big into that part of things.
yeah.
I think that's a technological advancement that's been really helpful. But that said, if I don't damage that midsection, I like that part because it's got the loins running up the back and the tenderloins in the center. And we like to take all of our parts and we do 35 to 40 minutes in simmered in stock. Then I like kind of let them dry. Then I do the flour like you were saying, and I fry them.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like to soften them first by simmering them because I find them like just very tender. But I like that middle piece. But if you're not eating that part as much, you must prefer the hindquarter then, I'd assume. Huh?
Yeah, definitely.
It's pretty nice, right?
Oh
Like
yeah,
a big fat squirrel leg. Because
yeah,
I'll see a squirrel now. It's so funny when you come to think so differently than everybody else. Because I'll be like in a park with somebody, and they'll be like, "Oh, look at that squirrel," and I'm just like, "That's a nice fat leg right there. It looks real good to me."
yeah,
you know.
yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
It's really funny. Um, let's uh, let's circle back around to what you were saying before, because you were saying that we were kind of describing the literature earlier, and I guess we never really got into the foraging literature part. So I guess we're circling back to that now. Let's talk about what the foraging literature is like, and then I want to talk about where you're wanting to see it go. And I really like what you're saying, so I'd like to get on board and kind of help with that too. I mean, I feel like actually I write a lot about that myself. I tend to do less of the identification stuff and more of the philosophical, but I do write a lot about life history of animals too.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to say on the other side, I get annoyed when I see a fishing post. Let's say I'm on Instagram. I see somebody with a fishing post and they're like, "Yeah, slayed them today on the rocks, blah, 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 blah." And it won't even say the name of the species that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So I'll be like, I don't live there. I don't even know what that fish is, dude. I just know you slayed them on the rocks. Like to me, I'll be like, "Hey man, tell me the name of it." But I get what you're saying, because in the foraging literature, it tends to be like common name, list of common names, scientific name,
Mm-hmm.
range, distribution, and it's a lot more like field guidey stuff, and not always we're not approaching it like philosophically the way hunters are.
Yeah, and I think that that's really missing in our world. And where I come from is predominantly from the foraging world, and and just like you, I'm kind of like an adult onset hunter. Um, but I have always known about hunting literature because I've really been into reading. Um, and so I read a lot of hunting stuff, and it often gets a pass for that. Whereas in the foraging world, it's like you go on Instagram, and I follow a ton of different foragers, and how many posts can you see before you just get like, okay, this is getting old? Where you're just seeing like somebody saying like, well, this is this plant and it's good for this, and here's its scientific name.
Right. Let's imagine right now too, like let's say that there's quite a lot of those people are listening right now.
Yeah.
Right? So let's imagine that, and then tell them tell them specifically what you think they're doing too much of, and then let's talk about what you'd like to see. Let's say you have the archetype of the typical Instagram forager in front of you. Kind of tell them like, hey man, this is what I see you guys are doing, and then here's what I think our community should be doing more of, and here's why.
I think that I'm not going to say that I think anybody should do anything if you are not feeling moved to do it. But if you are feeling stuck in the loop, like I did a couple years ago, where I started to see this circular pattern on all of my social media platforms of me just talking about the same plants every single year.
Yeah, it comes right back around. You're like, oh, it's April again. Here we go. I'm right back to this.
It's time for me to make my annual wild leek post.
Go back 1 year and you can find the same post.
Yeah. So if it were up to me to like help guide people, I would just suggest like start writing about the feelings that places give you. Start writing about maybe like what the ecosystem you're in looks like. Why you should maybe like use these things beyond just like why it might like taste good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I think we're all on like a journey. So I think for some people, that's really effectively how they're feeling because they are new to it and that's where they're at. And that's the excitement for them at the time. So that's like, please keep doing that. But I get what you're saying for those of us who've been at it a little bit longer and we're more in it more deep. I do like the idea of attracting people to it more from a philosophical place and from an emotional place. And I've also been thinking a lot about, that kind of post you'll see on social media. It's usually a girl who's doing it's like a very sexually provocative post from the image.
Yeah.
And then you read the post and it's like, I've been thinking a lot about, and it's just it has nothing to do with the picture, right? They're getting the eyeballs with sex, but then they're writing about, often it's like self-help stuff, And I don't often think that's like a really emotionally unhealthy person when I see that, but I get the idea of it. So I've been doing more of that lately. So like I did a post this year that was a picture of a brook trout in my hand, but the post was about, it was about a whole deeper kind of way of looking at the world. And it was really me talking about how I'm finding solace from all of the chaos in the news and in the media and in our culture right now in nature. And so that actually got really good engagement because the picture was cool. And how a brook trout's just so gorgeous and it's really easy to get people's eyeballs with something like that. So there's my like booty girl. And then, their post is like about something that I think people can connect with emotionally. So that's kind of a direction that I've been going to, because like you, I'm so tired of every year getting back and being like, what do I say about leeks this year? Like here's, you know what I mean? There's a lot to say, but it's like, why keep looping? And also, I think sometimes there's a trap for those of us who present wild foods that, do you ever run into this where you feel like if you haven't posted for a while, like, and you see other people posting like, well, I'm still foraging. I just haven't been posting. I got to get stuff out there so people know I'm still doing it. You know what I mean? It's like all these like weird things that come up, that I think are just like toxic sides of social media.
Yeah. My guiding light in that is my friend Sam Thayer. I can't say it enough. Whenever I think, I have to post on social media, I always think, well, Sam doesn't even have social media.
Amen.
And he is like an absolute beast,
We all know he's the guy.
I know.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's so unique because he's so, as a person, he's so energetic and he's so eclectic and he's got so many things that he's a superhuman for sure. But, besides his 3 books and his local stuff that he does, it's not like he's blanketing the internet with content. Yet he's who we all kind of defer to, I've noticed,
Yeah, I know. It's him. For me, it's him and Arthur. And then as far as like culinarily, I love Pascal Baudor's stuff,
Yeah, Pascal's great. I think Alan Burgo's great. I think Hank Shaw's really good. I love the folks I had recently on the show from Elevated Wild. They're really amazing. Yeah, there seems like, because actually back to the food literature, there's a world where that's a very dynamic world. People are able to write on food and cooking in a way that I don't feel like, oh God, now this, because I don't know, food, you sort of want to eat something different all the time anyway. So it's the food side of the wild food world seems to be doing great. The hunting side seems to be on a really good trajectory right now. I think the fishing world could use some help, and I think that, like you said, the foraging world, it would be cool to move a little bit outside of the identification part, so that people know that, hey, this isn't just like botany that we're doing this for. This is like a deep understanding of connecting to landscapes. I mean, that's kind of what I've always seen as like a Trojan horse for that anyway, but you
Yeah.
know,
Well, one thing that I think also people should know is like not everybody cares to learn scientific names.
yeah,
Like
right.
I know all the scientific names of the plants that I teach, and I've spent years learning them. But at the end of the day, I often think, did the Anishinaabe that lived here in the Great Lakes region, did they care about like what the scientific name of the plant was, or did they just go, "Oh, this is edible, and I'm going to eat it"?
Yeah, yeah. I had John Slattery on recently. I don't know if you got to hear that show, but he's a
I,
forager out
I
of. Go ahead.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
I did hear it.
Okay.
Yep.
I really appreciated what he said, because he's kind of the guy out for the desert Southwest, at least that I know of. And it's like such a different flora and landscape out there. And his connection to it, as you heard, is much more through the indigenous culture of that region. But he kind of brought up how it almost, getting into the scientific name and all that nomenclature, almost took away a little bit from his experience. And I've had a similar thing. I don't want to say it didn't enrich my life to learn the scientific names, because it's made me far clearer in my discernment about what's this and what's that, in a way that I really did need, and it's helped me a lot, and helped me to get finer, clearer resolution on things. But as far as that sense of connectedness to the landscape, it actually made it worse for me, because it made me much more acutely aware of like how much I don't know, instead of like how good I feel. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Because I would feel like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what that is. I can't remember this. Oh man, I'm bad at this. Oh no. And so many people know so much more, and I'm going to have to learn so much. And I got to,
Hmm.
it's just like, man, just be out there and have the experience. That's more valuable for you long term. You know what I mean? And then obviously having both is really good, but
Yeah, so I that's what I'll often tell people is like, knowing the scientific name is great and wonderful if you really want to get nerdy about it and if you want to talk to other people that are also plant nerds. But like there's no point in me telling somebody the scientific name of a plant. Like my mom,
right.
she doesn't care.
Right. Or like, how many hunters are going to talk about the scientific name of deer or rabbits or squirrels or turkeys? It very rarely comes up. I have appreciated, because I do like that stuff and I like to note it. And I have appreciated with the movement that's kind of focused around Steve Rinella and Meat Eater. And so I'm saying too, like all the associated sort of friends and content that's come out around that show and those guys.
Yeah.
I appreciate that they've brought some of that in there, because I think there was almost not enough of it because people just say deer, and it's like, man, there's black-tailed deer, there's mule deer, there's white-tailed deer. Like, what deer are we talking about? So I
Yeah.
appreciate that. But hunters don't feel the need. Now, that said, something that Arthur Haynes says, and I love to echo, there aren't any poisonous look-alike deer.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you
Yeah, I
can kind
gotcha.
of get away with more in that world. But at the same time, it seems like I think people come into foraging with a sense of wonder, and then they get
Yep.
overwhelmed with a sense of science.
Yep.
And it's like, hey, that's not why I came.
Yep.
So kind of, what are
Exactly.
your concluding thoughts on that idea that people have maybe gone too far down the scientific rabbit hole, and maybe lost a little bit of the magic and wonder of the connection into wild places? And is that what you're kind of saying you want to see more writing about, more about what people are feeling and experiencing than what they are just knowing?
Yeah, so I believe that we live in a culture now that just totally glorifies knowledge, not wisdom, but knowledge, right? So everybody is posting about the scientific name and what family it comes from and this and that, and it's soulless.
Yeah.
It does not feel like, hey, I'm going out to this place. Like I just wrote about the other day, I was up in the blueberry barrens up in the upper peninsula of Michigan, and I wrote about how absolutely stunningly beautiful it was. The whole entire ground cover is like blueberries and reindeer lichen, and I got horse flies and stable flies and deer flies all swarming around me and mosquitoes, and I'm just in this blueberry heaven. And I went and swam in Lake Superior after I was done. And, it was this magical experience. We saw a baby black bear up on the side of our car. All of that
Cool.
stuff, you know, all of that stuff happens. And I wasn't up there thinking, what is the scientific name of this blueberry species?
Right, right.
And like,
Nerd alert.
yeah, no, I mean, I do think about that stuff as well, but it's not like it doesn't come into the forefront. I harvest blueberries because I want to eat blueberries because they're legitimately the best berries ever.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
it's not like I'm harvesting them so I can get like cool points on social media.
Right. And sometimes it's like, nice book report, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, okay, so you got home and you got on Wikipedia and you copy and pasted a bunch of stuff to your, you know what I mean? And you put this thing together. But like, I don't feel like that. I feel like you're reporting that. And that's okay too. But, maybe tell us a little bit about your time out there. And
Yes.
also, because when we released WildFed, I had a lot of feedback from people saying things like, I never realized foraging was such an adventure. I kind of thought it would be more boring than what I'm seeing there, but that looks like actually really fun and adventurous.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like, yeah, that's what we're doing. That's why we do it. That's a
Yeah.
big part. And I think too, like for me, a lot of that scientific name stuff, what family, what group, et cetera, that stuff's more interesting to me when I'm at home.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I come home, I want to learn about that stuff. It enriches my field time. But when I'm in the field, I don't like to be thinking about that or distracted by those things.
I know exactly. Yep. It's pretty. It is fascinating stuff. I mean, and another guest you've had on. I don't know if it was on WildFed or Rewild Yourself, but Thomas Elpel. He wrote the Botany.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that book, or what's it called? Um,
Botany in a day?
yeah, Botany in a Day. Now that is an absolutely fascinating book, and I won't lie. I'll sit down and I'll read that. From time to time, I'll just read a couple chapters because I love finding out like what are the similarities and how did these things evolve. But at the end of the day, when I'm out there picking plants, it's like that's fascinating and all. But the reason I'm doing it is because I want to feed myself wild, healthy food.
Yeah, and it's like in order to hang out with a friend, I don't need to pull their demographics. I don't need to see the family tree. I don't need to know their criminal history. I don't need to see their report cards, and I don't need fingerprints or blood samples or anything. I encounter them at face value. And so it's nice to approach the living world like that before because it's kind of like that Zen thing too. It's like, man, if your cup's already overflowing, like how
Yep.
much can you put in? And it's like, I'm there for the experience. I need a sort of empty cup. And it does, the more you ingrain the knowledge, the less, it fills up your cup. It's more like the cup becomes made out of that. But if you're
Yep.
just coming in there with a head full of stuff, it's going to be really hard to see the signs to get. I think a lot of us, we don't want to sound new agey or too far out or too spiritual. So there's a lot of stuff that happens to us in the field we don't always talk about with people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there's like magic happens. You
Oh yeah.
experience things. It's just like you can't. It's not coming from knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I've so many times like been by myself, walk like just I'll do sometimes like 7-8 mile walks by myself in the woods, and you just have this clearing of the head, and everything just comes into like focus, and there's so much clarity on life, and you just like it's like I hate to say it, but it sounds like really hippie, but it's like you go on like a mini like psychedelic trip, you know.
Yeah,
You just
yeah.
feel like all this clarity, and it's like maybe because you're breathing in so much fresh oxygen from the trees, and everything's green, and they say that that's good for us. I don't know, whatever it is, it's amazing.
It's a lot of things, right? They kind of like every little piece is, you could almost dissect every part of that walk and be like, this part's good. Like it's the walking part's good for you. The
Mhm.
green part's good for you. The
Yeah,
forest bathing part's good for you. The fresh air part's good. And like, the not being at a computer is good for you. And like, as you add it all up, but it really is the gestalt of the whole experience comes together in a way that's so much greater than the sum of all those parts, right?
exactly. Yep. And so that's why I would just, I guess, to conclude with the what I would like people to do is like move more towards just talking about your experiences in wild places. And like I really do think it's important for us to start getting people to move more towards ecoculture. Like Sam says, like I really do believe that I looked it up last year and I can't remember what it is, but there's thousands of acres of spinach. And in my opinion, that is a completely unnecessary crop. These places.
When you harvest wild greens, you're like, meh.
Yeah. So you could get rid of, not that the farmers would want to do this, but I'm just saying, like, you could get rid of thousands of acres of spinach and instead replace it with an ecosystem that grows more than just one crop and also grows more than one crop at one time.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, and people could
Multiple
start to have
seasons.
multiple seasons. It could have you could have multiple species growing during the entirety of the season, which is like,
Multiple levels too. You know what I mean? As far as like from the
exactly.
ground up.
Exactly. And these landscapes can be managed. I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but think about, they said that whoever it was that went through the Amazon thought they saw millions of people, you know, in the Amazon, the first explorers from the
Mhm.
West.
Right.
Like, we can manage our landscapes to have more food. A lot of people always say, well, everybody can't eat wild, and I think everybody could. Probably not like everything. We couldn't eat all of the acorns, but we could all eat some wild greens.
Yeah, and then I think, like, because Sam makes his argument for ecoculture and really does say, like, I do think that if we approached it right, it actually could feed the world. And I'm like, wow, that's a pretty bold approach. He's a very smart guy. I love that essay. When people say that to me, like, well, not everybody can hunt. Well, not everybody can fish. First of all, like, there's the people who are doing it like, well, that's a privilege. It's like, you shouldn't even talk about it. It's like, dude, whatever. I don't even have space for your philosophy, to be honest. But but when people make that legitimate argument, like, hey, don't you think, like, not the whole world can't do this? It's like, the whole world can't eat caviar and drink champagne. That doesn't mean, the people who are doing it shouldn't do it, or the whole world can't golf. The whole world can't go on flights. The whole world can't. It's like, if we judged everything based on what the whole world can do, we'd be doing very little in our day to day. That said, there's many ways that food is gotten, and this way is important, and this way needs to be a part of the whole picture. People harvesting wild food, hunting, fishing, foraging is not only the way that we did it forever, so it's legitimate just from that perspective, but it is a legitimate part of the big picture of how we feed the world. And so the
Yeah.
idea that you shouldn't do it just because the whole world, that doesn't make any sense, or that you shouldn't promote it because the whole world can't do it. It's like, the whole world can't, drink smoothies, but I don't see people writing on other people's social media like, quit promoting smoothies. The whole world doesn't have blenders. It's like, shut up, man. Like, this is an important piece. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, I think we definitely need to promote it more. And the more of us that get on board, the great aspect of what we all do is that it's going to lead to more open space. It's going to lead to more habitat. It's going to lead to cleaner ecology. It's going to lead to all those things because you start to be a stakeholder in all those things. And that's not something that happens when you're on any number of the fad diets where you get all the food at the supermarket, right? It doesn't
Exactly.
lead to any of those things.
Yeah. So if you get all of your food at the grocery store, then you're gonna basically fight to the death to protect that. Whereas if you get your food out of the woods, you're gonna do everything you can to protect that instead. So, like, clear cuts don't become invisible to you anymore.
Right. And the thing is, it's like, if all your food comes from the supermarket, you tend to be more focused on the quality of the supermarket. Is it clean? Is it well stocked? Do you like the staff there? Is the customer service
Yeah.
good? How's the checkout process? When you get your food from the wild, you're thinking about, is this place clean? How can it be improved?
Yeah.
How do I manage it? How do I protect it? It just changes focus. And not to say that everybody should shift over to doing what we're doing. We understand, you understand that very well. You train people in it, so you know how hard that is. You know what that would take logistically and
Yeah.
educationally. So it's not like we're saying that. We're just managing our part of the world, and our part of the world is around wild foods. And so we're not trying to tell everybody to do this, but we do want to get people excited who have an aptitude toward it or an interest in it, for sure, right?
Yep. Definitely.
Man, tell people who are thinking about working with you, or hearing, oh, he teaches classes. Tell us a little bit about, who comes to your classes, what can they expect to get out of them, what's available, and when and how do they get to them?
So I teach classes predominantly, like I said, in northern Michigan, in Traverse City area. I have started expanding out, although that proved to be quite disastrous this year, as I planned multiple cities that were not near me, and then we had the COVID-19 situation hit, and I ended up refunding, hundreds and hundreds of dollars to people because they didn't want to come. So I am still a little bit nervous about filling up my schedule this fall with classes, but I do have a class planned right now for October, and I'm probably going to add a couple more. I just may limit the size of them in case we get any further lockdown stuff going on. But you can sign up for all those at knowmeforager.com.
Yeah, I think that there's I hope that you have a lot of local interest, or people who are wanting to come to you, because I think that COVID-19, and all this, it's so annoying having to even talk about it, right? My brother keeps joking with me every day. My brother works with me at Surthrival, and we're always joking, like, what are the things you're hearing? He's like, due to the COVID.
Yeah.
Like, everything's due to the COVID, or like based on what's going on in the world right now. Like all those little euphemisms that we've come up with, they're so tedious. But I think due to the COVID and all the things going on in the world right now, there is an uptick in interest in this stuff, and people are going, hey, I'd like to, I don't mean just from like I got to survive the pandemic, but more like, hey, I'd like to feel more food security emotionally, and if learning about a few wild foods gives me a little of that sense of that, then I want to do that. Right. So I think that there's a lot of people wanting to onboard right now, and it's exciting. And people like you who are teaching, I just wish you tons of prosperity and success in lots of full classes this fall. And I hope people listening to this who are anywhere in your bioregion or wanting to go there, get in touch with you, because, it's just these skills, getting them into the hands of other people is so important. And for right now, what's kind of annoying to me about this era that I was born into is that I have no concern that basketball, football, or soccer are going to die out. I have no concern, you know what I mean, that chess is going to die out. I have no concern that playing horseshoes is going to be lost. But like, we could actually lose, wild food foraging because people just forget how. And so it's like that. I think it's so much more important than so many other things that are really stable. So those of us who are passing this knowledge on, I just think it's really important, man. So thanks for what you do out there. And it's just awesome to get to talk to you finally.
Yeah, likewise, man. I just want to say one more thing is that this is totally surreal. Like, I've been a longtime listener of Rewild Yourself and then now WildFed, and to like be on the show knowing that I'm going to be on your podcast is crazy, blowing my mind.
Well, we should have had you on a lot sooner. So sorry for the wait. Thanks for your patience. And man, I hope I can get out your way to film an episode with you out there sometime. I'd love to. I really want to try what were you calling them? Pasties?
Oh yeah, the pasties. Yeah,
I kind of want to try a squirrel pasty.
Yeah, you definitely should. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, let's stay in touch, man. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Tell people one more time your domain and then what your Instagram handle is.
My Instagram is Clay 2_ Bowers and or at Clay 2_ Bowers, and then my website is www.knowmeforager.com.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow the show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.